The wind howled like a wounded animal across the desolate plains of Copper Creek, Texas, but it couldn't drown out the sharp crack of leather against skin or the muffled cries that followed. Beatrice Evans stumbled backward, her hand flying to her reddened cheek as she faced the circle of townsfolk gathered in the dusty street. The year was 1875, and in this small frontier town, being different wasn't just discouraged, it was dangerous. "You think you're better than us with your books and your ideas," Martha Wilson spat, her weathered face twisted with contempt as she brandished her riding crop. "Fill in our children's heads with nonsense about women votin' and Indians bane people." Beatrice straightened her spine despite the pain radiating through her body. At 22, she'd come west with dreams of starting a school where everyone could learn, regardless of background. Her honey-brown hair had come loose from its pins during the assault, falling in waves around her bruised face. "Education isn't a threat, Mrs. Wilson," she said, her voice steadier than her trembling hands. "It's a path forward for all of us." Another woman stepped forward, her face twisted with anger. "My boy came home talkin' about how maybe the Chinese workers deserve fair wages. Where'd he get such talk if not from you?" Sheriff Miller watched from the porch of his office, making no move to intervene. In his mind, the schoolteacher had brought this on herself with her progressive notions. "That's enough now." A deep voice cut through the crowd. The gathered townsfolk parted as Samuel Tucker urged his chestnut mare forward. The tall cowboy's presence commanded attention, his broad shoulders and weathered face bearing testament to years under the harsh western sun. Samuel dismounted in one fluid motion, his spurs jingling as his boots hit the dirt. At 28, he was known throughout the territory as a skilled rancher and a fair man who kept to himself. His ranch, the Twisted Pine, lay a few miles outside town, and he rarely ventured into Copper Creek except for supplies. 6 against 1 doesn't seem sporting, he said, his voice deceptively casual as he positioned himself between Beatrice and her attackers. Martha Wilson sneered. "This ain't your concern, Tucker. This woman's poisonin' the minds of our youth." Samuel's green eyes flickered over to Beatrice, taking in her split lip and the determined set of her jaw. "Seems to me the only poison here is whatever's making grown folks beat on a schoolteacher in broad daylight." The sheriff finally pushed away from his post. "Tucker, take your hero act elsewhere. The town council's decided Miss Evans' services are no longer required." Beatrice clutched her torn shawl tighter. "They can't do that, I have a contract." "Contract's void," Sheriff Miller said with a dismissive wave. "You violated moral conduct clauses by teachin' improper material." Samuel's jaw tightened. "And the proper response was to set a mob on her. She's got until sundown to clear out her things from the schoolhouse and leave town," the sheriff continued as if Samuel hadn't spoken. "Or we'll consider more permanent solutions to the problem." The threat hung in the air like gunsmoke. Beatrice felt her heart sink. 6 months of work, of connecting with her students, of building something meaningful, all destroyed because she dared suggest that perhaps the world was changing, and Copper Creek should change with it. Samuel looked at her, something unreadable passing across his face. "Miss Evans, I'd be pleased to offer you assistance in retrieving your belongings." Beatrice hesitated, studying the cowboy's face. She'd seen him around town occasionally but had never spoken to him. His reputation was that of a fair and honest man, but she'd learned the hard way that reputations in Copper Creek meant little. With few options and the sun already beginning its descent, she nodded. "Thank you, Mr. Tucker." The crowd began to disperse, muttering threats and insults. Martha Wilson jabbed a finger in Beatrice's direction. "Don't think this is over. People like you don't belong out here." Samuel's hand moved subtly toward the revolver at his hip, and Martha backed away, scowling. When the street had emptied, Beatrice's composure finally cracked. She swayed slightly, and Samuel gently caught her elbow to steady her. "You're hurt," he said quietly. "I'll be fine," she replied, though the throbbing in her ribs suggested otherwise. I need to collect my things before sundown. Samuel nodded, releasing her arm once she was steady. My horse is just there. I'll escort you to the schoolhouse. The small wooden schoolhouse sat at the edge of town, a humble building that Beatrice had filled with books, maps, and hope. Now, as she unlocked the door with trembling hands, it felt like entering a tomb. Samuel tied his horse to the hitching post and followed her inside, removing his hat respectfully. The single room was neat and organized, with rows of desks facing a small blackboard. Colorful maps adorned the walls, and a bookshelf held a modest collection of volumes: science, literature, history. It's not much, Beatrice said softly, but it was something. Samuel surveyed the room. You did this all yourself? Yes. Most of the books are mine. I brought them from Boston. She moved to her desk, pulling out a carpet bag from underneath. The town council provided the building and basic supplies, but little else. As she began carefully packing her books, Samuel noticed a framed photograph on her desk, a younger Beatrice standing proudly in front of a grander school building, surrounded by smiling women in graduation caps and gowns. You studied back east, he asked, gesturing to the photograph. Beatrice glanced up, a small smile touching her lips despite her injuries. Yes, I attended the normal school in Boston. It's a teaching college for women. The smile faded. I thought education could change things out here. That was naive, I suppose. Samuel shook his head. Not naive. Brave. He helped her take down a map of the United States, carefully rolling it. Most folks out here fear what they don't understand. And they don't understand much beyond what they've always known. They worked in companionable silence for a while, Beatrice directing which items were hers to take and which belonged to the town. Her movements were stiff, and she occasionally winced when reaching for something. They hurt you badly, Samuel observed, not as a question. Beatrice paused in her packing. Nothing that won't heal. After a moment she added, it wasn't the first time, just the worst. Samuel's expression darkened. How long has this been happening? The comments started my first week. The parents became more hostile when I introduced new material, then came the threats. Today was just. She trailed off, gesturing to her face. The culmination. And the sheriff did nothing. Sheriff Miller made it clear early on that my Eastern ideas weren't welcome. He said I was asking for trouble. Samuel cursed under his breath. That man's badge is worth less than the metal it's stamped from. As the sun dipped lower, they finished packing Beatrice's personal belongings into 2 carpet bags and a small trunk. It wasn't much to show for 6 months of work and a lifetime of dreams. What will you do now? Samuel asked as he secured the trunk to his horse. Beatrice looked down the road leading out of Copper Creek, uncertainty clouding her eyes. The next stagecoach isn't due for 3 days. I suppose I'll need to find somewhere to stay until then. Samuel hesitated, then said, Miss Evans, I have a proposition for you. Beatrice tensed slightly, her experiences having taught her to be wary of men's propositions. Noting her reaction, Samuel quickly added, I have a small cabin on my property. It was built for a ranch hand who moved on last year. It's simple but sound, and you'd be safe there until you decide your next step. Why would you help me? Beatrice asked directly. You don't know me. Samuel's weathered face softened. I know enough. I know you tried to bring knowledge to a place that needs it desperately. I know you stood your ground even when it cost you. He gestured to her bruised face. And I know what it's like to be judged for being different. Beatrice studied him, weighing her limited options. Stay in town and risk further violence, or trust this stranger who had already shown more decency than anyone else in Copper Creek. Your cabin, she finally said, just until the stagecoach comes. They traveled in the fading light, Beatrice riding double with Samuel while he led a pack horse carrying her belongings. The Twisted Pine Ranch emerged from the gathering dusk, a modest main house with a barn, corral, and several outbuildings spread across a valley tucked between rolling hills. It's beautiful, Beatrice murmured as they approached. It's home, Samuel replied simply. Been building it up for 5 years now. He helped her dismount near a small cabin set apart from the main house. It was simple but well-maintained, with a porch that caught the last rays of sunset. "It's not fancy," Samuel said, unlocking the door, "but it's clean and solid." The interior was basic: a bed, table, 2 chairs, a small stove, and a wash basin. A bookshelf stood empty against one wall, and a window looked out toward the main house. "This is more than generous," Beatrice said, emotion thick in her voice as the events of the day caught up with her. Samuel nodded, suddenly awkward. "There's a pump out back for water. Outhouse is just beyond. I'll bring your things in and then leave you to rest." As he turned to go, Beatrice touched his arm lightly. "Mr. Tucker, thank you not just for the shelter but for intervening today. I don't know what would have happened if you hadn't come along." His eyes held hers for a moment. "You can call me Samuel." "And you don't need to thank me for basic decency, Miss Evans." "Beatrice," she corrected. "And yes, I do. Decency hasn't been particularly common in my experience lately." After bringing in her belongings, Samuel produced a small jar from his pocket. "It's arnica salve for your bruises." "My mother's recipe." Beatrice accepted it gratefully. "Your mother is here," a shadow passed over his face. "No, she passed some years back, but she taught me which plants heal and which harm. Rest now. I'll check on you in the morning." When he had gone, Beatrice finally allowed herself to cry, quiet sobs racking her body as she sat on the edge of the bed. For all her determination and courage, the reality of her situation crashed down upon her. She was alone in a strange place, her dreams shattered, her body aching, with nothing but uncertainty ahead. Yet, as she applied the salve to her bruises and unpacked a nightgown from her bag, she found herself thinking of Samuel Tucker's quiet strength and unexpected kindness. In a day filled with cruelty, it shone like a beacon. She slept fitfully, dreams filled with angry faces and raised fists, but whenever she startled awake, the solid walls of the cabin reminded her that, for now at least, she was safe. Morning brought clarity and pain in equal measure. Beatrice's body ached in places she hadn't realized had been struck, and her face in the small mirror above the wash basin was a map of bruises. But the rational part of her mind was working again, plotting her next steps. A knock at the door interrupted her thoughts. She pulled her shawl around her shoulders and opened it to find Samuel holding a covered tray. "Thought you might be hungry," he said, his eyes widening slightly at the full extent of her injuries now visible in the morning light. "Thank you," she said, stepping back to let him enter. "I'm afraid I look worse today than yesterday." Samuel set the tray on the table, revealing a simple but hearty breakfast of eggs, bacon, and biscuits. "Bruises always look their worst on the second day, but you're still standing, which says more about you than the bruises do." Beatrice smiled despite herself, then winced as the motion pulled at her split lip. "You're kind to say so." "It's not kindness to speak the truth." He hesitated, then added, "I've been thinking about your situation. The stagecoach that comes through here is headed to Fort Worth." "Would that suit your purposes?" Beatrice sat down at the table, considering. "I suppose it must. I have a small amount of savings, enough perhaps to secure passage further east eventually." "You're returning to Boston." There was something like disappointment in his voice. "I don't know," she admitted. "I came west because I believed in the power of education to transform lives, especially in places where opportunities are limited, but after yesterday." She trailed off, staring at her plate. Samuel pulled out the other chair and sat down. "Copper Creek isn't the only town in the West, Beatrice." She looked up at him, struck by the use of her given name. "No, but I suspect its attitudes aren't unique either. Some places are more forward-thinking than others. Millsville, about 40 miles north, has a female doctor. And Riverton to the east has had a school for both white and Mexican children for 3 years now." Hope flickered briefly in Beatrice's eyes before caution dampened it. "Why are you telling me this?" Samuel held her gaze. "Because running back to Boston feels like letting them win. And from what little I know of you, Beatrice Evans, you don't strike me as someone who gives up easily." The directness of his assessment startled a laugh from her. "You've known me less than a day, Mr. Tucker." "Samuel," he corrected gently. And sometimes you can learn more about a person in a crisis than in years of casual acquaintance. Beatrice took a bite of her breakfast, considering his words. These other towns you mentioned, have you been there? Riverton frequently. I sell horses to several ranchers in the area. The school there is always looking for qualified teachers. The current schoolmaster is elderly and has been talking of retirement. And they wouldn't mind a woman with unconventional teaching methods. Samuel's expression turned thoughtful. Riverton was founded by Quakers. They have some unusual ideas themselves about equality and education. I think you'd find it different from Copper Creek. For the first time since the attack, Beatrice felt a spark of possibility. I'll consider it. Thank you for the information. They ate in companionable silence for a few minutes before Samuel spoke again. I need to tend to the horses and check the north pasture fence today. Would you like to join me? The fresh air might do you good, and sitting alone with your thoughts after what happened. He trailed off, but his meaning was clear. Beatrice hesitated. Part of her wanted nothing more than to hide away until the stagecoach came, licking her wounds in private. But the thought of hours alone with her memories of the attack was equally unappealing. I'd like that, she said finally. Though I'm afraid I'm not much of a horsewoman. Samuel smiled, a warm expression that transformed his serious face. Old Thunder is gentle as a lamb. He'll take good care of you. After breakfast, Samuel left her to dress while he prepared the horses. Beatrice put on her sturdiest skirt and a simple blouse, pinning her hair up as best she could with her sore arms. When she emerged from the cabin, Samuel was waiting with 2 saddled horses, his chestnut mare and a placid-looking dun gelding. That's Thunder, Samuel said, nodding to the dun. Don't let the name fool you. Previous owner had a sense of humor. Getting Beatrice mounted proved challenging given her injuries, but Samuel was patient and respectful, offering support without making her feel helpless. Once she was settled in the saddle, he handed her the reins. Just hold these loosely, he instructed. Thunder knows to follow Penny here. He patted his mare's neck affectionately. They rode at a gentle pace, Samuel pointing out features of his land, the creek that never ran dry, the stand of cottonwoods that provided shade for the cattle in summer, the distant hills where wild mustangs sometimes appeared. Beatrice found herself relaxing despite her sore body, the rhythm of the horse's gait and the open landscape soothing her troubled mind. How did you come to own this ranch? She asked as they paused atop a small rise overlooking the property. Samuel's eyes scanned his land with quiet pride. My father was a buffalo soldier, sergeant in the 10th Cavalry. Beatrice's eyebrows rose in surprise. The Buffalo Soldiers were regiments of black cavalry who had distinguished themselves fighting in the Indian Wars and protecting settlers. He saved his pay for years, Samuel continued, dreaming of land of his own. When he mustered out in '67, he came here and started with just 50 acres and a dozen cattle. And your mother, she was the daughter of a freedman who worked as a guide and healer. They met when her father was hired by my father's regiment. His expression softened at the memory. They built this place together, acre by acre, until the fever took them both in '70. Understanding dawned on Beatrice. So when you said you know what it's like to be judged for being different. Samuel nodded, his gaze still on the horizon. Half black, half white, not fully accepted by either world. The army gave my father purpose and respect, but civilians weren't always so enlightened. Even now, there are folks in town who won't do business with me directly. I'm sorry, Beatrice said softly. Samuel turned to her, his expression resolute. Don't be. My parents taught me that a person's worth isn't determined by others' opinions. They faced worse than I ever have and still built something beautiful. He gestured to the ranch spread below them. I honor them by making it thrive. Beatrice studied him with new appreciation. Your parents sound like remarkable people. They were. A smile touched his lips. My mother would have liked you. She believed fiercely in education. Taught me to read and write before I ever set foot in a schoolhouse. They continued their ride, checking fences and cattle as they went. Samuel showed Beatrice how to spot a loose fence wire and explain the basics of cattle ranching. She proved an attentive student, asking intelligent questions that impressed him with her quick mind. By midday, they stopped in the shade of a large oak tree for a simple lunch of bread, cheese, and dried fruit that Samuel had packed in his saddlebags. Beatrice sat carefully on a fallen log, mindful of her bruised ribs. "May I ask you something personal?" Samuel said as they ate. Beatrice nodded, curious. "What drove you to leave Boston and come all the way to Texas to teach?" She considered the question, absently brushing crumbs from her skirt. "My father was a professor at Harvard. He believed education was the great equalizer that knowledge could overcome prejudice and ignorance. He taught me that as surely as he taught me Latin and mathematics." She paused, gathering her thoughts. "When he died 3 years ago, I inherited enough to secure my independence. I could have stayed in Boston, taught at a ladies' seminary, or married suitably, but it felt insufficient. The children there already had opportunities. I wanted to go where education could truly change lives. And so you came to Copper Creek." "It wasn't my first choice," she admitted with a wry smile. "I applied to schools in Denver, Santa Fe, even San Francisco, but no one wanted a young, unmarried woman from the East. Copper Creek was desperate enough for a teacher that they overlooked my deficiencies." Samuel shook his head. "Their loss is immeasurable." Beatrice looked at him curiously. "You place a high value on education for someone who—" She stopped, realizing how her words might sound for a cowboy. Samuel finished, amusement in his eyes. "I didn't mean, no offense taken, but ranching requires more knowledge than most realize. Animal husbandry, weather patterns, land management, business sense. My father made sure I learned from books as well as experience." He nodded toward the distant hills. "This land demands respect and understanding, not just hard work." As they packed up to continue their ride, Beatrice found herself studying Samuel with growing interest. He defied every preconception she might have had about Western ranchers: thoughtful, articulate, and surprisingly progressive in his thinking. They spent the afternoon checking the north pasture, where Samuel showed her how he was experimenting with different grasses to improve grazing for his cattle. His knowledge of botany impressed her, especially when he pointed out medicinal plants similar to those in the salve he'd given her. By the time they returned to the ranch, the sun was low in the sky, painting the landscape in golden hues. Beatrice was exhausted but exhilarated, her mind temporarily freed from the cycle of fear and uncertainty that had gripped her since the attack. Samuel helped her dismount near her cabin, his hands strong and steady at her waist. For a brief moment, their faces were close, and something unspoken passed between them, a recognition, perhaps, of kindred spirits. "Thank you for today," Beatrice said, stepping back. "It was exactly what I needed." "My pleasure," Samuel replied, his voice warm. "Would you care to join me for supper at the main house? My housekeeper, Mrs. Flores, makes an excellent chicken stew." Beatrice hesitated only briefly before nodding. "I'd like that very much." The main house was larger than the cabin but still modest, built of sturdy logs with a wide porch wrapping around 2 sides. Inside, it was surprisingly comfortable, with well-crafted furniture, colorful woven rugs, and bookshelves lining one wall of the main room. Mrs. Flores, a plump Mexican woman in her 50s, clucked sympathetically at the sight of Beatrice's bruises but asked no questions, simply setting an extra place at the table with quiet efficiency. Dinner was indeed excellent, the stew rich and flavorful, accompanied by fresh cornbread and preserves. Conversation flowed easily between them, ranging from books they had both read to Samuel's plans for expanding his herd with a new breed of cattle more suited to the Texas climate. After Mrs. Flores had cleared the dishes and bid them good night, Samuel invited Beatrice to see his library. The collection was impressive for a remote ranch, classics of literature alongside practical manuals on agriculture, medicine, and law. "My father believed knowledge was power," Samuel explained as Beatrice ran her fingers along the spines. He built this collection book by book, often ordering volumes from as far away as New York or Chicago. Beatrice paused at a shelf containing works by Emerson, Thoreau, and Fuller. He had excellent taste. As do you, Samuel observed. Your teaching methods weren't just progressive, they were thoughtful. You weren't simply parroting ideas from a standard primer. Beatrice turned to him, surprised. How would you know that? Samuel looked slightly embarrassed. I spoke with one of your students, Daniel Cooper. His father brings him along when he delivers supplies to the ranch. The boy couldn't stop talking about the experiments you conducted in class and the stories you read them from around the world. A lump formed in Beatrice's throat at the mention of her student. Daniel has a quick mind. He deserves better than the education he'll receive now. All the children do, Samuel agreed, which is why you should consider Riverton before deciding to return east. Beatrice moved to the window, looking out at the darkening landscape. Even if Riverton would accept me, what happens when they discover my ideas don't align with theirs? I can't keep running from town to town, Samuel. He joined her at the window, his reflection appearing beside hers in the glass. Some battles are worth fighting, even if victory isn't guaranteed. Isn't that what you were trying to teach those children? She turned to face him, struck by his perception. Yes, it was. Then perhaps you should follow your own lesson. His voice was gentle but firm. The West needs teachers like you, Beatrice. People unafraid to challenge comfortable ignorance. They stood close, the air between them charged with something neither was ready to name. Beatrice was acutely aware of his presence, the clean scent of soap and leather, the steadiness of his gaze, the quiet strength he projected without intimidation. I should return to the cabin, she said finally, her voice softer than she intended. It's been a long day. Samuel nodded, stepping back. Of course, I'll walk you. The night air was cool as they crossed the short distance between the main house and the cabin. Stars blanketed the sky in a display impossible to witness in Boston's gas-lit streets. At her door, Beatrice turned to thank him again for the evening, but the words died on her lips as she saw his expression open, admiring, and tinged with something that made her heart beat faster. You're remarkable, Beatrice Evans, he said quietly. Copper Creek was too small-minded to see it, but that doesn't diminish your worth. Before she could respond, he took her hand gently and raised it to his lips, pressing a chaste kiss to her knuckles. Sleep well. We can talk more about Riverton tomorrow if you'd like. Beatrice nodded, unable to find her voice as he released her hand and stepped back. She watched him walk away, his tall figure silhouetted against the starlit sky, before entering the cabin and closing the door behind her. Leaning against it, she pressed her hand to her chest, feeling her rapid heartbeat. It was absurd to be so affected by such a small gesture, and yet, there was something about Samuel Tucker that resonated with her in a way no man ever had before. His quiet confidence, his respect for her mind, his unwavering support when everyone else had turned against her. She ready for bed slowly, her mind racing with possibilities she hadn't considered before. Perhaps Samuel was right. Perhaps Riverton might offer what Copper Creek could not, a community open to progress, to education that expanded horizons rather than reinforcing boundaries. And perhaps, a small voice whispered in her mind, there might be other reasons to remain in Texas rather than fleeing back east. The next morning dawned clear and warm. Beatrice awoke feeling better than she had the previous day, her bruises beginning to fade from angry purple to yellowish green. After washing and dressing, she stepped outside to find a note tucked into her door frame. Had to ride to the south pasture early, back by noon. Help yourself to anything you need in the main house. Mrs. Flores was kneading dough in the kitchen when Beatrice knocked hesitantly at the back door of the main house. Come in, the older woman called, wiping flour from her hands. Senor Tucker said you might come by. Are you hungry? I can make eggs. Oh, no thank you, Beatrice replied. I just thought I might borrow a book if that's all right. Mrs. Flores smiled warmly. Of course. The library is yours to use, and there is coffee on the stove if you want some." Beatrice accepted a cup gratefully and made her way to the library. She selected a volume on the history of the Texas territory and settled into a comfortable chair near the window. The book was fascinating, offering perspectives on the region's development that differed significantly from what she'd learned in Boston. She was so engrossed that she didn't hear Samuel return until he appeared in the doorway, his hat in his hands and an amused expression on his face. "I see you found something of interest," he said, nodding to the book. Beatrice looked up with a smile. "It's quite enlightening. Your father had excellent taste in historical accounts. He believed in understanding all sides of a story." Samuel entered the room, setting his hat on a side table. "How are you feeling today?" "Better," she admitted. "Your mother's salve works wonders. I'm glad to hear it." He hesitated, then said, "I have to ride into town this afternoon for supplies. I was wondering if you'd like to accompany me to the telegraph office. You could send inquiries about teaching positions in Riverton or elsewhere." Beatrice's smile faded. "Won't that cause trouble? The sheriff made it clear I wasn't welcome in Copper Creek. Sheriff Miller's authority ends at the town limits, and he knows better than to create problems with me. Besides," Samuel added with a hint of steel in his voice, "you have every right to use the telegraph office. I'll be with you the entire time." The prospect of returning to town so soon after the attack was daunting, but Beatrice recognized the practical necessity. If she were to pursue opportunities elsewhere, she needed to act quickly. "All right," she agreed. "When would we leave?" "After lunch. We should be back well before dark." The ride into Copper Creek was tense but uneventful. Beatrice wore a bonnet that partially concealed her bruised face, though nothing could hide her identity entirely in a town so small. Samuel rode beside her, vigilant and protective without being overbearing. They drew stairs as they made their way down the main street, but no one approached them directly. Samuel tied their horses outside the general store and offered Beatrice his arm as they walked to the telegraph office. The operator, a thin man with spectacles perched on his nose, looked up nervously as they entered. "Mr. Tucker," he greeted, his eyes darting to Beatrice and then away. "Miss Evans." "Mr. Phillips," Samuel nodded. "Miss Evans needs to send some telegrams." "I'm not sure that's," the operator began, but Samuel cut him off. "It's a public service, Phillips, and Miss Evans has money to pay for it." After a moment's hesitation, the operator nodded and pushed a stack of forms across the counter. Beatrice thanked him and began composing her messages, one to the school board in Riverton inquiring about the teaching position Samuel had mentioned, and another to a former classmate in Boston who might have connections to other schools in the West. As she wrote, the door opened behind them. Sheriff Miller stepped in, his hand resting pointedly on his holstered pistol. "Thought I made myself clear about you leaving town, Miss Evans," he said, his voice hard. Samuel turned slowly to face him. "Miss Evans is conducting legal business and will be on her way shortly." The sheriff's eyes narrowed. "You taking her side in this, Tucker, might affect how welcome your business is around here." "Is that a threat, Sheriff?" Samuel's voice was dangerously quiet. Miller shifted uncomfortably. Unlike most in town, he knew Samuel's full background, including his military training and reputation as a marksman. "Just stating facts. Town councils made their decision about her. And I've made mine about offering her sanctuary until she determines her next steps." Samuel's stance was relaxed but alert. "Unless you're planning to extend your jurisdiction to my private property?" The tension in the small office was palpable. Beatrice finished her telegrams quickly and handed them to the operator, who took them with a trembling hand. "That will be 75 cents, he said nervously. Beatrice counted out the coins and placed them on the counter. "Thank you, Mr. Phillips." Samuel offered her his arm again. "If we're done here, Sheriff, we'll be on our way." Miller stepped aside reluctantly, his face flushed with anger. "This isn't over, Tucker. For your sake, I hope it is." Samuel's voice was pleasant, but the warning was unmistakable. Outside, Beatrice released a shaky breath. I'm sorry to have caused you trouble. Samuel shook his head as they walked toward the general store. You haven't. Miller's bluffing. Half the town relies on business with my ranch, and he knows it. In the store, the atmosphere was similarly tense. The proprietor, Mr. Winters, served them efficiently but coolly, avoiding direct conversation with Beatrice. Other customers whispered behind their hands or openly stared at her bruised face. As they were completing their purchases, Martha Wilson entered with her daughter. Seeing Beatrice, she stopped short, her face contorting with anger. Well, if it isn't the heretic schoolteacher, she spat. Couldn't stay away, could you? Samuel stepped forward slightly. Mrs. Wilson, we're just conducting business and will be on our way. Martha's gaze shifted to him, contempt evident in her expression. So the rumors are true, you've taken her in. I always knew there was something not right about you, Tucker. Beatrice felt Samuel tense beside her but was unprepared when Martha suddenly lunged forward, grabbing her arm roughly. You think you're better than us with your fancy education and your Eastern ways, Martha hissed, her face inches from Beatrice's. But you're nothing but a— Samuel's hand clamped around Martha's wrist, forcing her to release Beatrice. That's enough, he said, his voice low and dangerous. Touch her again and you'll answer to me. Martha wrenched her hand away, rubbing her wrist. You're both fools. This town has standards, moral standards. Morality isn't beating a woman in the street, Beatrice said quietly, finding her voice at last. True morality is treating all people with dignity and respect, regardless of their background or ideas. Martha sneered, but something in Samuel's expression kept her from approaching again. You two deserve each other, she said venomously, before storming out of the store, her daughter trailing behind. The remaining customers watched in stunned silence as Samuel calmly paid for their supplies. We'll need these loaded in the wagon, he told Mr. Winters, who nodded mutely. Outside, once their purchases were secured, Samuel helped Beatrice into the wagon seat. Are you all right? He asked, his voice gentle once more. She nodded, though her hands trembled slightly. Yes, I'm sorry for the scene. You have nothing to apologize for. He climbed up beside her and took the reins. Martha Wilson has been the source of more trouble in this town than anyone else. Her husband is on the town council, which explains much about their decisions. As they drove away from Copper Creek, Beatrice felt both relief and a strange sense of closure. The town that had rejected her was already receding, physically and emotionally. Thank you, she said after they had traveled some distance, for standing up for me, again. Samuel glanced at her, his expression serious. You stood up for yourself in there, Beatrice, what you said about morality that took courage. Not as much as physically intervening, she pointed out. Physical courage is common out here, moral courage is rarer and more valuable. He returned his attention to the road. What you teach, not just facts and figures, but how to think, how to question, that's what frightened them most about you. The realization warmed her despite the unpleasant confrontation. I never considered it that way. They rode in companionable silence for a while, the landscape opening around them as they left the town behind. The late afternoon sun cast long shadows across the rolling hills, and a gentle breeze carried the scent of wildflowers and sage. Samuel, Beatrice said finally, what you said to the sheriff about offering me sanctuary, did you mean it? He looked at her directly. Every word. You're welcome at Twisted Pine for as long as you need or want to stay. The sincerity in his voice made her heart flutter. And if Riverton doesn't work out, then we'll try elsewhere. Or, he hesitated, then continued, or you could consider other options. Such as, Samuel's hands tightened slightly on the reins. The children of my ranch hands have no formal education. Mrs. Flores teaches them basic reading and numbers when she has time, but they deserve more. If you were interested, I could convert one of the outbuildings into a proper schoolroom. Beatrice stared at him, stunned by the suggestion. You'd build a school on your ranch for how many children? 7 currently, ranging from 5 to 14. 3 from Mexican families, 4 from white families who work for me. He glanced at her. It wouldn't be a grand institution, but it would be a place where you could teach freely, without interference from small-minded town councils. The idea was simultaneously thrilling and daunting. "You hardly know me, Samuel. Why would you invest in such a venture based on such brief acquaintance?" He was quiet for a moment, his eyes on the horizon. "Because in 2 days, I've seen enough to recognize what kind of teacher, what kind of person you are. And because—" He paused, choosing his words carefully, "because I believe some people come into our lives for a reason, at exactly the moment they're needed most." The sentiment was so unexpected from this practical, rational man that Beatrice found herself momentarily speechless. Before she could formulate a response, they crested a hill, and the Twisted Pine Ranch came into view, bathed in the golden light of the setting sun. "Home," Samuel said simply, urging the horses forward. And in that moment, looking at the peaceful valley spread before them, Beatrice found herself wondering if it might someday be her home too. The next few days passed in a comfortable routine. Beatrice rested and recovered from her injuries while exploring the ranch and getting to know its rhythms. She spent mornings helping Mrs. Flores with household tasks, learning about local cooking and customs from the kind Mexican woman. In the afternoons, she often accompanied Samuel on his rounds of the property or assisted with simple ranch tasks that didn't strain her healing body. In the evenings, they would share dinner and then retire to the library, where conversations about books and ideas stretched late into the night. Samuel proved to be not only well-read but deeply thoughtful, challenging Beatrice's perspectives while respecting her intellect in a way few men ever had. 4 days after their trip to town, a rider arrived from Copper Creek with telegrams for Beatrice. The first, from her friend in Boston, expressed sympathy for her situation and offered contacts in Denver and Santa Fe if she wished to pursue them. The second, from Riverton, was more immediately promising. Position available, stop current teacher, retiring end of month, stop credentials, impressive stop interview, required stop, can you come next week, query respond, soonest stop. Beatrice read the message twice, her heart racing with excitement and apprehension. Samuel watched her face, waiting patiently for her to share the news. "Riverton wants to interview me," she said, looking up from the paper. "Next week." A smile spread across his face. "That's wonderful news." "Yes, it is." She studied the telegram again, "though I confess I'm nervous." "After Copper Creek, Riverton is different," Samuel assured her, "and you'll be prepared this time, knowing what questions to ask about their expectations and policies." Beatrice nodded, but a shadow of doubt remained. "If you're right, this could be everything I hoped for when I came west." Samuel's expression was difficult to read. "I'm happy for you, Beatrice. Truly." That evening, as they sat on the porch watching the sunset, Beatrice found herself torn between excitement about the potential new position and an unexpected reluctance to leave Twisted Pine. In less than a week, the ranch had become a sanctuary, and Samuel had become important to her in ways she was only beginning to understand. "If I get the position in Riverton," she said carefully, "I'd still like to help with your idea for a school here. Perhaps on weekends or during school holidays." Samuel looked at her, surprise evident in his features. "You do that, of course. It's a wonderful idea and the children deserve an education." She hesitated, then added softly, "And I've come to care about this place." The admission hung between them, laden with unspoken meaning. Samuel's expression softened, his eyes reflecting the golden light of the setting sun. "I've come to care about more than just this place," he replied, his voice low and earnest. Beatrice's breath caught in her throat. She had suspected his feelings were deepening alongside her own, but neither had given voice to the growing attraction between them. "Samuel," she began, uncertain how to respond to the implicit declaration. He shook his head gently. "You don't need to say anything. I know we've known each other only a short time, and I know your career, your independence is important to you, as it should be." His gaze held her steadily. "I just wanted you to know that whatever you decide about Riverton, there will always be a place for you here." The simple sincerity of his words touched her deeply. In her experience, men either dismissed her professional ambitions entirely or tolerated them as a temporary phase before the natural progression to marriage and domesticity. Samuel seemed to genuinely respect her calling as a teacher, to see it as integral to who she was rather than an inconvenient obstacle. "Thank you," she said finally. "That means more than I can express." They sat in companionable silence as darkness fell, each contemplating the possibilities of the future together and apart. The journey to Riverton took most of a day by wagon. Samuel insisted on accompanying Beatrice, not only for propriety's sake, but also because he genuinely wanted to support her through the interview process. They left early in the morning, packed with provisions for the trip and a change of clothes for Beatrice's meeting with the school board. Riverton proved to be larger and more prosperous than Copper Creek, with a wide main street lined with substantial buildings, including a 2-story schoolhouse that made Beatrice's heart leap with excitement. Samuel arranged rooms for them at the town's respectable hotel and escorted Beatrice to meet with the head of the school board that afternoon. Ezra Thompson was a Quaker in his 60s with kind eyes and a thoughtful manner. He welcomed Beatrice warmly to his office in the back of the general store he owned. "Miss Evans, we were most intrigued by your telegram. Teachers with formal training are rare in these parts, especially those willing to come west." "I appreciate the opportunity, Mr. Thompson," Beatrice replied, handing him the letters of recommendation she had fortunately packed among her belongings before leaving Copper Creek. As Thompson read through her credentials, Beatrice took the opportunity to ask the questions that had been forming in her mind since receiving the telegram. "Mr. Thompson, I believe in an education that encourages critical thinking and exposes students to diverse perspectives. Some communities find such approaches unsettling. I'd like to understand Riverton's expectations before proceeding further." The older man looked up, a hint of a smile playing at his lips. "Miss Evans, our community was founded on principles of equality and intellectual freedom. We seek a teacher who will challenge our children to think for themselves, not merely recite facts." He set her papers down. "I understand there were difficulties in Copper Creek." Beatrice tensed slightly. "Yes, my teaching methods were considered too progressive." Thompson nodded thoughtfully. "Copper Creek has a reputation for narrow-mindedness. Here in Riverton, we value education as a path to enlightenment, not merely practical skills." The interview continued for nearly an hour, with Thompson outlining the school's curriculum, student body, which included children from all backgrounds in the community, and facilities. The more Beatrice heard, the more convinced she became that Riverton might indeed be the opportunity she had dreamed of when coming west. "The board will need to meet to make a formal decision," Thompson explained as the interview concluded, "but I can tell you unofficially that I am most impressed with your qualifications and philosophy, Miss Evans. We would be fortunate to have you join our community." "Thank you, Mr. Thompson." "When might I expect to hear the board's decision?" "We meet tomorrow evening. I could send word to your hotel by the following morning." Beatrice thanked him again, and Samuel, who had been waiting patiently outside, escorted her back to the hotel. His expression was one of cautious optimism as she recounted the interview. "It sounds promising," he said as they walked along Riverton's boardwalk. "Thompson seems to appreciate your approach to education." "Yes, he does." Beatrice's excitement was tempered with a new uncertainty. "It's almost too perfect. The position, the community, the philosophy, everything I hoped to find when I came west." Samuel glanced at her, noting the conflicted tone in her voice. "Isn't that what you want?" "Of course," she said quickly. "It's just—" She trailed off, unsure how to express the complicated emotions swirling within her. They had reached the hotel, and Samuel stopped at the foot of the steps, turning to face her. "Beatrice, what is it?" She looked up at him, at the face that had become dear to her in such a short time. "If I accept this position, I'll be living here in Riverton. 40 miles from Twisted Pine, understanding dawned in his eyes. Ah, it's a significant distance, she continued, trying to keep her voice steady. Not impossible to traverse, but not a casual ride either. Samuel's expression softened. Distance is relative out here. 40 miles is nothing when there's a good reason to make the journey. The implication hung between them, full of promise and uncertainty. Before Beatrice could respond, a woman's voice called out from across the street. "Samuel Tucker, is that you?" They turned to see an elegant woman in her 30s approaching, her fashionable dress and confident manner marking her as someone of importance in the town. "Rebecca," Samuel greeted her with a polite nod. "It's been some time." The woman reached them, her curious gaze moving between Samuel and Beatrice. "Almost a year, I believe. You've been missed at the Millers' spring gatherings." "Rebecca Miller, allow me to introduce Miss Beatrice Evans," Samuel said formally. "Miss Evans, Mrs. Miller is the wife of Riverton's bank president. Pleased to meet you, Mrs. Miller," Beatrice said, offering her hand. Rebecca took it with a warm smile. "The pleasure is mine, Miss Evans. Are you new to our little town?" "Miss Evans is interviewing for the teaching position at the school," Samuel explained. Rebecca's eyes lit up with interest. "How wonderful! We've been in dire need of a qualified teacher since Mr. Henderson announced his retirement. Have you come from far?" Beatrice hesitated, unsure how much to reveal about her situation in Copper Creek. Samuel answered smoothly, "Miss Evans most recently taught in Copper Creek, but she's originally from Boston." "Boston, how exciting to have such cosmopolitan influence in Riverton." Rebecca turned to Beatrice with genuine enthusiasm. "You must join us for dinner this evening. My husband would be delighted to meet you, and several school board members will be present as well." The invitation was unexpected but potentially valuable. Beatrice glanced at Samuel, who nodded encouragingly. "That's very kind of you, Mrs. Miller. I would be honored." "Excellent, and of course you must come too, Samuel. It's been far too long since you've graced our table." Rebecca's tone suggested a history between them that piqued Beatrice's curiosity. After arranging the details of the dinner invitation, Rebecca continued on her way, leaving Beatrice and Samuel alone once more. "That was fortunate," Samuel commented as they entered the hotel. "The Millers are influential in Riverton. Their support would be valuable for your position." "You seem well acquainted with Mrs. Miller," Beatrice observed, trying to keep her tone casual. A flicker of amusement crossed Samuel's face. "Rebecca's father was one of my father's first allies in the region. He sold us our original land when others refused to deal with a black man." His expression grew more serious. "When her father died, Rebecca and her husband continued the friendship. They've been good neighbors over the years." Beatrice felt a twinge of embarrassment at the implication behind her question. "I see. I'm glad you'll be accompanying me to dinner then. Having a familiar face will make it less daunting." Samuel smiled. "You faced down an angry mob in Copper Creek, Beatrice. I hardly think a dinner party will prove challenging for you." His confidence in her brought a warmth to her chest. "Perhaps not, but I'm grateful for your company nonetheless." That evening, Samuel escorted Beatrice to the Millers' impressive two-story home on the outskirts of town. Dressed in her best blue dress, somewhat wrinkled from being packed in her carpet bag, but still presentable, Beatrice felt a nervous anticipation as they approached the well-lit house. The dinner party proved to be an enjoyable affair. Rebecca Miller was a gracious hostess, and her husband James was a thoughtful, intelligent man who asked insightful questions about Beatrice's educational philosophy. 2 school board members were indeed present, and by the end of the evening, Beatrice felt confident that she had made a positive impression on all of them. Throughout the evening, she couldn't help noticing the easy familiarity between Samuel and the Millers. They clearly held him in high regard, treating him with a respect that stood in stark contrast to the attitudes she had witnessed in Copper Creek. As they walked back to the hotel under a canopy of stars, Beatrice commented on this observation. "The Millers seem to value you greatly," she said. "As do others in Riverton, from what I could tell." Samuel nodded thoughtfully. Riverton has always been more progressive than surrounding communities. It's one reason I suggested you consider teaching here. And yet you choose to live closer to Copper Creek. The Twisted Pine was my parents' dream, he said simply. And good land is where you find it, not where you wish it to be. They walked in silence for a moment before Samuel added, but distance, as I said earlier, is relative out here. Riverton is close enough for regular visits, for trade, for connections that matter. The implication hung in the air between them. Beatrice found herself contemplating a future where she taught in Riverton while maintaining her growing connection to Samuel and Twisted Pine. Was such an arrangement possible? Could she balance her professional ambitions with her developing personal feelings? At the hotel, Samuel escorted her to her room, pausing at the door. Whatever the board decides tomorrow, Beatrice, I want you to know that I'm proud of you. You've faced adversity with grace and determination. Your students, wherever they may be, will be fortunate indeed. The sincerity in his voice touched her deeply. Thank you, Samuel, for everything. Their eyes held for a long moment, and Beatrice felt the air between them charged with unspoken feelings. For a breathless instant, she thought he might kiss her and realized with startling clarity that she wanted him to. Instead, Samuel took her hand gently and pressed it to his lips, much as he had done that night at the cabin. Good night, Beatrice. Sleep well. As she entered her room and closed the door behind her, Beatrice leaned against it, her heart racing. In just over a week, this man had appended her carefully constructed plans and visions for her future. Now, on the verge of securing exactly the teaching position she had dreamed of, she found herself contemplating possibilities she had never before considered. The following day, Samuel took Beatrice on a tour of Riverton, introducing her to merchants and residents he knew from his business dealings in town. Everywhere they went, she was struck by the community's openness and the respectful way people treated both her and Samuel. They visited the schoolhouse, where the current teacher, Mr. Henderson, showed her the facilities with obvious pride. The building was well maintained, with large windows providing ample natural light, proper desks and blackboards, and a modest but respectable library. The children here are eager learners, Henderson told her as they toured the classroom. From the finest families to the poorest, they all come with a thirst for knowledge. It's been my greatest joy to teach them these past 15 years. Why are you retiring? Beatrice asked. The elderly man smiled ruefully. My eyes aren't what they used to be, and my wife wishes to move to California to be near our daughter and grandchildren. He regarded Beatrice thoughtfully. Mr. Thompson speaks highly of you. I believe you would do well here, Miss Evans. By late afternoon, they had returned to the hotel to await word from the school board meeting scheduled for that evening. Beatrice found herself growing increasingly anxious, pacing the small lobby as Samuel watched with patient understanding. What if they don't select me? She worried aloud. Or worse, what if they do, and it turns out to be another Copper Creek situation once they truly understand my methods? Samuel rose from his chair and gently caught her hands, stopping her nervous movement. Beatrice, look at me, she did, finding steadiness in his warm gaze. Riverton is not Copper Creek. You've met the people, seen the school, spoken with board members. Trust your instincts about this place. His thumbs traced small circles on the backs of her hands, a soothing gesture that calmed her racing thoughts. And if for any reason it doesn't work out, remember that you have options. You always have a place at Twisted Pine. The reminder centered her. You're right. I'm letting fear cloud my judgment. Fear is natural after what you experienced, he said gently. But don't let it control your decisions. Their conversation was interrupted by the arrival of a messenger boy with a note from Ezra Thompson, requesting Beatrice's presence at his office at 9 o'clock the following morning to discuss the board's decision. That's a good sign, Samuel assured her after the boy had left. If they weren't interested, they would have simply sent a rejection note. Despite his reassurance, Beatrice slept fitfully that night, her dreams a confused mixture of hopeful scenarios and recreations of the attack in Copper Creek. She awoke early, taking extra care with her appearance before meeting Samuel for breakfast in the hotel dining room. "You look lovely," he said as she joined him, noting the care she had taken with her hair and the fresh collar she had added to her dress. "Thank you." She attempted to eat but found her appetite lacking as the appointed hour approached. Samuel escorted her to Thompson's office, promising to wait nearby. Before she entered, he squeezed her hand encouragingly. "Remember who you are and what you believe in. The rest will follow." Ezra Thompson greeted her warmly, inviting her to sit in a comfortable chair across from his desk. His expression gave away nothing as he arranged some papers before him. "Miss Evans, the board met at length last night to discuss the teaching position." He paused, studying her face. "There was considerable discussion about your experience and qualifications." Beatrice tried to maintain a composed expression despite her racing heart. "I understand. I appreciate the board's thorough consideration." Thompson's serious expression suddenly broke into a warm smile. "We would like to offer you the position, Miss Evans. The board was unanimously impressed with your credentials and your educational philosophy." Relief and joy flooded through her. "Thank you, Mr. Thompson. I'm honored to accept." "Excellent." He pushed a contract across the desk toward her. "The terms are outlined here: salary, accommodations, teaching duties. We would like you to begin at the start of next month, which would give Mr. Henderson time to introduce you to the students and familiarize you with our curriculum." As Beatrice reviewed the contract, she found the terms more than fair: a salary comparable to what she had earned in Copper Creek, plus housing in a small cottage near the school that was maintained by the town for the teacher's use. "This is very generous," she said, genuinely pleased with the offer. "We value education in Riverton, Miss Evans, and we value educators who can inspire our children to think beyond the boundaries of our small town." Thompson's expression grew more serious. "I should mention that we did receive a wire from someone in Copper Creek warning us against hiring you. They made some rather wild accusations about your teaching methods and moral character." Beatrice's happiness dimmed. "I see. We disregarded it entirely," Thompson continued firmly. "Mr. Henderson made inquiries among your former students' families and received glowing reports of your teaching from several of them. Whatever led to your departure from Copper Creek appears to have been the result of small-mindedness rather than any deficiency on your part." Gratitude welled up in Beatrice. "Thank you for your trust, Mr. Thompson. I promise I won't disappoint you or the board." After signing the contract and discussing a few additional details, Beatrice left the office with her spirits soaring. Samuel was waiting outside, his expression expectant. "They offered me the position," she told him, unable to contain her smile. "I start next month." The genuine happiness that spread across his face warmed her heart. "Congratulations, Beatrice. I knew they would recognize your worth." In that moment of shared joy, something shifted between them, a recognition that their paths, which had crossed so unexpectedly, were now intertwining in ways neither had anticipated. Beatrice impulsively reached for his hand, squeezing it tightly. "I couldn't have done this without you, Samuel. Your support, your belief in me when I doubted myself." His fingers closed around hers. "You would have found your way regardless. You're stronger than you know, Beatrice Evans." They stood there on Riverton's main street, hands clasped, futures aligning, both understanding that while challenges remained ahead, they would face them together. The following weeks passed in a whirlwind of activity. Beatrice divided her time between Twisted Pine, where she continued to recover from her ordeal and deepen her connection with Samuel, and Riverton, where she worked with Mr. Henderson to prepare for her new position. The teacher's cottage proved to be a charming two-room structure with a small garden, simple but comfortable furnishings, and bookshelves lining one wall of the main room. It would be a perfect home for her new life in Riverton. Meanwhile, at Twisted Pine, Samuel began converting an unused storage building into a small schoolroom for the ranch children, consulting with Beatrice on the layout and necessary supplies. Their collaborative work on this project brought them closer, their shared passion for education forming a foundation for deeper feelings. As the day approached for Beatrice to officially move to Riverton and begin teaching, she found herself experiencing conflicting emotions. Excitement about her new position mingled with reluctance to leave the sanctuary she had found at Twisted Pine, and the man who had created it for her. The evening before her departure, Samuel invited her to a special dinner at the main house. Mrs. Flores had outdone herself, preparing all of Beatrice's favorite dishes discovered during her stay. The table was set with a fine cloth and candles, creating an atmosphere of celebration tinged with bittersweet farewell. After dinner, Samuel suggested a walk to watch the sunset from the ridge overlooking the ranch. As they stood side by side in the golden light, he turned to her with uncharacteristic hesitation. "Beatrice, these past weeks have been transformative. Having you here has brought a light to Twisted Pine I didn't realize was missing." She smiled up at him, her heart full. "It's been the same for me, Samuel. I came here broken and afraid, and you helped me find my strength again." "I've been thinking about the distance between here and Riverton," he continued, his voice thoughtful. 40 miles is significant but not insurmountable." "No," she agreed softly, "not for things that matter." Samuel took her hands in his expression serious but tender. "You matter to me, Beatrice, more than I thought possible in such a short time. I don't want to complicate your new beginning in Riverton, but I need you to know that my feelings for you have grown into something deep and true." Beatrice felt tears prick her eyes at his honest declaration. "Samuel." "I'm not asking for promises," he hastened to add. "I know your teaching career is important to you as it should be. I just want you to know that whatever happens, however our paths continue to cross, my feelings won't change." In that moment, standing in the golden light of sunset with this remarkable man who had rescued her in more ways than one, Beatrice made a decision. She stepped closer to him, her eyes meeting his directly. "Samuel Tucker, you've shown me what true strength and kindness look like. You accepted me exactly as I am, with all my unconventional ideas and ambitions." Her voice grew stronger with each word. "I've never met anyone like you, and I don't want distance or circumstance to keep us apart." Hope dawned in his eyes. "What are you saying, Beatrice?" "I'm saying that while I'll be teaching in Riverton, my heart will be here too with you. And 40 miles is indeed not insurmountable for two people who care deeply for each other." Samuel's face transformed with joy. Slowly, giving her time to pull away if she wished, he leaned down and pressed his lips to hers in a gentle, questioning kiss. Beatrice responded with a certainty that surprised even her, her arms sliding around his neck as the kiss deepened into something profound and promising. When they finally parted, Samuel rested his forehead against hers. "I'll come to Riverton every weekend," he promised, "and you'll always have a home here at Twisted Pine whenever you want it." "And the school for the ranch children?" she asked, smiling up at him. "We'll be ready for you to teach in whenever you have time," he assured her. "We'll make this work, Beatrice. Together." As the sun set on her last evening at Twisted Pine, Beatrice felt not sadness but anticipation. The path ahead might have its challenges, but she would face them with Samuel by her side, their shared vision of education and equality binding them together across any distance. The following months proved Samuel's words prophetic. Their arrangement, unconventional as it might have seemed to others, worked beautifully for them. Beatrice thrived in Riverton, her teaching methods embraced by students and parents alike. The school board, impressed with her results, gave her considerable freedom to develop her curriculum. True to his word, Samuel traveled to Riverton most weekends, sometimes staying at the hotel, other times returning to Twisted Pine the same day after spending precious hours with Beatrice. Their courtship blossomed under these constraints, each reunion sweeter for the separation that preceded it. On alternating weekends, Beatrice would travel to Twisted Pine, where she taught the ranch children in the schoolroom Samuel had created. The 7 children, ranging from 5 to 14, proved eager students, their diverse backgrounds bringing richness to the classroom that Beatrice treasured. As spring turned to summer, their relationship deepened. Samuel introduced Beatrice to the wider community around Twisted Pine, including several neighboring ranchers and their families who had been friends of his parents. To her delight, most welcomed her warmly, impressed by her intelligence and her obvious affection for Samuel. The autumn brought an unexpected visitor to Riverton, Daniel Cooper, one of Beatrice's former students from Copper Creek. The 12-year-old boy appeared at her cottage one afternoon, hat in hand, his expression a mixture of hope and determination. "Miss Evans," he greeted her formally. "Pa said I could come see you if I finished my chores early." "Daniel," Beatrice welcomed him warmly. "How wonderful to see you." "Come in, please." Over cookies and milk, Daniel explained that his family had moved to a farm halfway between Copper Creek and Riverton, fed up with the increasingly restrictive atmosphere of the smaller town. "Pa says folks there got mean after you left," the boy explained. "They started fighting about everything: the church, the store, even where to build the new well." He looked at her earnestly. "He says it's 'cause you made people think, and some folks didn't like that feeling much." Beatrice smiled at the child's perception. "Sometimes thinking leads to questioning, and questioning can be uncomfortable." "I miss your lessons," Daniel admitted. "The new teacher just makes us memorize things. He doesn't explain why anything matters." A plan began forming in Beatrice's mind. "Daniel, how far is your new farm from here?" "About 10 miles, Miss Evans. Pa let me ride in on my own today, but it took near 2 hours. Would your parents consider allowing you to attend school here in Riverton? We have several students who board in town during the week because they live too far to travel daily." The boy's face lit up. "Really? You think they might?" "I'd be happy to speak with them about it," Beatrice offered. "Riverton's school has much more to offer than Copper Creek's, and we welcome students who are eager to learn." Daniel's visit set in motion changes that would further intertwine Beatrice's life with the communities around her. After meeting with the boy's parents, arrangements were made for Daniel to board with an elderly couple in Riverton during the school week. His enthusiasm for learning reignited under Beatrice's guidance, and soon other families from outlying areas began inquiring about similar arrangements for their children. By winter, Beatrice found herself at the center of an educational renaissance in the region. The school in Riverton expanded to accommodate the influx of new students, and her weekend classes at Twisted Pine grew to include children from neighboring ranches. Samuel watched her flourish with pride and growing love. On a crisp December evening, as they sat before the fire in his home after teaching the ranch children, he took her hand in his. "You've done more in 6 months than most could accomplish in years," he said, his voice warm with admiration. "You're changing lives, Beatrice." She leaned against his shoulder, content in the moment. "We both are. This partnership, your support and vision combined with my teaching, it's more effective than either of us could be alone." Samuel turned to face her fully, his expression serious. "I've been thinking about that partnership, about how well we work together, how much stronger we are as a team." Beatrice's heart quickened as he reached into his pocket and withdrew a small velvet box. "I had planned something more elaborate," he admitted with a smile, "but sitting here with you, watching the firelight on your face, I can't think of a more perfect moment." He opened the box to reveal a delicate gold ring with a small pearl surrounded by tiny diamonds. "This was my mother's. She always said it should go to someone who embodied her spirit of independence and compassion." Tears welled in Beatrice's eyes as Samuel continued. "Beatrice Evans, you came into my life unexpectedly, but now I can't imagine a future without you in it. Would you do me the honor of becoming my wife?" The question, though not entirely unexpected given the direction of their relationship, still filled Beatrice with emotion. "Oh, Samuel." A flicker of uncertainty crossed his face at her hesitation. "I want you to know," he added quickly, "that I would never ask you to give up teaching. We would find a way to make it work, just as we have these past months." His understanding of what mattered most to her, his respect for her calling, cemented what Beatrice already knew in her heart. "Yes," she said, her voice strong and clear despite her tears. "Yes, I will marry you, Samuel Tucker." The joy that illuminated his face as he slipped the ring onto her finger was a sight Beatrice knew she would treasure forever. Their kiss was a promise, a commitment to a shared future built on mutual respect, shared values, and deep love. As winter gave way to spring, preparations for their wedding proceeded alongside their continuing work. They decided on a June ceremony at Twisted Pine, with guests from both Riverton and the surrounding ranches. To Beatrice's surprise, a letter arrived from Boston. Her former teaching mentor would make the journey west to attend the wedding. The day before the ceremony, as they walked among the wildflowers that carpeted the hills around the ranch, Samuel pointed to a site overlooking the valley. "I thought we might build our new home there," he said. "Larger than my current house, with more room for books and perhaps a nursery someday." Beatrice's heart swelled at the thought. "It's perfect, and close enough to both the ranch house and the schoolroom." "I've been thinking about the school," Samuel continued. "What if we expanded it? Built a proper schoolhouse that could serve all the children in the area who can't make it to Riverton?" The idea resonated with everything Beatrice believed in. A rural school, free from town politics and open to all children regardless of background. Exactly. You could hire another teacher to handle your classes in Riverton and focus on building something unique here. His eyes were alight with the vision. "It would be challenging, but together we could make it work," she finished, squeezing his hand. Their wedding day dawned clear and bright. Under an arch of wildflowers and before a gathering of friends from near and far, Beatrice and Samuel exchanged vows that honored both tradition and their unique partnership. The ceremony, performed by Ezra Thompson, who, as it happened, was also a justice of the peace, reflected their shared values of equality, respect, and devotion. "You may kiss your bride," Thompson announced with a smile after they had exchanged rings, Samuel receiving a simple gold band that had belonged to Beatrice's father. As their lips met, sealing their union, Beatrice felt a profound sense of rightness. From the darkness of that day in Copper Creek had emerged a light and love she could never have anticipated. The celebration continued well into the evening, with music, dancing, and stories shared around bonfires as the stars emerged above Twisted Pine. Many guests remarked on the unusual diversity of the gathering ranchers and townspeople, Mexicans and whites, even a few Native Americans from a nearby reservation with whom Samuel traded, all united in celebrating the union of two people who had found each other against the odds. Late in the evening, as the festivities continued around them, Samuel led Beatrice away from the crowd to a quiet spot beneath the stars. "Happy, Mrs. Tucker?" he asked, his arms encircling her waist. "Happier than I ever imagined possible," she replied truthfully, leaning into his embrace. "Though I think I might keep Miss Evans for professional purposes," Samuel chuckled. "Whatever you prefer, I'm secure enough in our marriage to handle having a wife with her own name and identity." Beatrice turned in his arms to face him. "Have I told you today how much I love you?" "You have," he said, brushing a strand of hair from her face, "but I wouldn't object to hearing it again." "I love you, Samuel Tucker," she said, rising on tiptoe to bring her face closer to his. "For seeing me as I am and loving me not despite but because of my differences." "And I love you, Beatrice Evans Tucker," he responded, his voice low and intimate. "For being exactly who you are, strong, passionate, and perfect to me in every way." As their lips met once more beneath the vast Texas sky, Beatrice knew that their story was just beginning. Together, they would build not just a life but a legacy, a school, a community, a family united by love and a shared vision of a better future. The girl who had been beaten for being different had found not only sanctuary but celebration of her uniqueness in the arms of a man wise enough to recognize her true worth. And in the years that followed, as their school grew, as their family expanded to include 2 daughters and a son, as their reputation for fairness and educational excellence spread throughout the territory Beatrice. And Samuel often looked back on that fateful day in Copper Creek with a sense of wonder. What had seemed like an ending had been merely the first chapter in a story more beautiful than either could have written alone. For in finding each other, they had discovered a fundamental truth: that sometimes being different isn't a flaw to be corrected but a gift to be cherished, especially when you find someone who looks at you and says, with perfect sincerity, "You're perfect to me."